Good afternoon and welcome to the Talent Taps Engineering webinar. We are incredibly lucky to have the panel of the panelists that we have today, and I think they will bring a multitude of different experiences to the table. They'll be interesting in terms of careers in engineering, in terms of graduate roles, in terms of internships and apprenticeships, and routes into the industry. We'll also talk about transferable skills as well. If you're currently doing a degree in engineering or thinking of going into engineering, how you will be able to access it. So I would like everybody, if there's so many people on our panel today, I'd like them all to introduce yourselves and to give us a brief background of yourselves, and then explain what your role currently is and where that fits into the bigger picture of your organisation or engineering in general. I'll introduce everybody individually, and we can go from there. So Alex, Reynolds, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi all, I'm Alex. So I grew up in Didcot near Oxford, and enjoyed maths and sciences at school, and somehow, without really thinking about it, ended up doing engineering at university at Lancaster University, studying mechanical engineering. I graduated in summer 2021, so 2 years ago, and then started on the graduate scheme at Rolls Royce down in Bristol shortly afterwards. So I'm now in my second year on the graduate scheme. I've had 4 different placements, so you move around and effectively do different jobs. And my current role is working as a systems engineer on GCAP, so the Global Combat Air Programme, which you might have seen in the news is the sort of next generation fighter for the UK. What that actually entails is sort of capturing the requirements from customers and different systems and tracking them against their design progress.
Brilliant, thank you, that's really helpful. And Max, yes, tell us where you're at.
My name's Max. I'm actually on my second placement at Bristol, even just as an intern. I grew up in Brighton, and after all this year, I'm going to be going back for my final bachelor's year in aerospace engineering, where I'm studying at the University of Nottingham. So my role now is I'm a design engineer on a team within future programs called HVX, which stands for Hypersonics Vehicle Experiment. So this just means I design various components which performance basically give me. And I create these components in CAD for then distributed amongst the aerothermal and as well as the stress teams as well.
Brilliant, thanks, brilliant. And Daniel, what about you? Could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm a stress engineer at Bristol Rolls Royce. I'm working in PTSME. So I started in September as a direct entry grad, so it's a bit different to the traditional graduate scheme. So it's basically where you go directly into the role, and it's not rotational, so it's just into one role. So I'm from Leicester originally, and I went to uni in Birmingham, and I studied mechanical engineering.
Oh, brilliant, and we'll come back to you and ask some more questions. Thank you. Chloe, hi, nice to meet you. Do tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, yes, so I am from Leeds originally, went to school in Leeds, and then went up to Newcastle University to study chemical engineering, which is a lot of fun up there. I think they actually prided themselves at the time in having one of the best ratios of female in engineering on that course in the country. I don't know what it's like at the moment, but there was still only 20% of us, but that's fine. And since then, I've come into a role on the graduate programme at Air Products. So similarly to the graduate programme described by some of the other guys, that's a rotational scheme. It's 3 years long, so I've done a variety of things. I actually came into marketing to start with, which was a shock to me initially, then went into applications equipment engineering, and then even further into kind of research and development engineering. And now I currently have finished that, and I sit in a business development role, which means I go out to customer sites like your Rolls Royces, and if they're looking at putting in a new process in place and they need some gas, they would come to me. I'd go to see them and work out what we need, basically. Quantities, flow rates, pressures, what kind of motor supply, where's safe, all the kind of the big picture things that then feed into what you can do with it, I guess. So that's where I'm at.
Brilliant, that's really helpful. Thank you so much. Lauren, welcome. Yeah, so you work with National Grid. Do tell us a bit more about yourself.
Hello, so yeah, I'm Lauren. I'm originally from Swindon in the southwest. I started uni a little while ago, actually. So I did a 4-year chemistry master's at Warwick University, which I finished in 2019. So a little while ago now. Since then, I've actually had 2 roles. So I started off, I also joined a graduate scheme, but my graduate scheme was at Warwick Manufacturing Group at Warwick University, looking at various things to do with lithium-ion batteries for automotive. Battery recycling was one of the big areas that I was working on, doing scientific research, so laboratory research, as well as like desk-based research on those. And then just towards the end of last year, I did move to National Grid ESO. So ESO, if people don't know, is the electricity system operator. So we don't buy or sell any electricity, but we just make sure electricity is in the right place at the right time. And I work in the Strategic Innovation Fund team, and I basically go around, look for innovators, companies, to work on our Strategic Innovation Fund projects, which are all of the projects that we are taking forward to try and reach the net zero goal by 2050.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And Kat, lovely to meet you. I think you're last on our list here. Do again explain a bit about what you're doing, where you've come from.
Yep, so I'm Kat Clarkson. I grew up in South London, and my career started by doing a degree in environmental engineering. I carried on and I stayed in research for a bit and did a PhD in environmental engineering as well, where I looked at recycling essentially the stuff in the middle of a Brita water filter, but using microwaves instead of traditional heating. After that, I went into construction. I decided that buildings were really interesting and I wanted to work in construction. So for the last longer than I'd like to admit, best part of a decade, I've been working on helping our designers and our construction teams build sustainable buildings. So that varies depending a little bit on what we're building, but sometimes it's about implementing wellness features. Sometimes it's getting to net zero and really energy efficient buildings. And the company that I work for does a really wide range. We do refurbishment projects, we build hospitals, schools, offices, all sorts of things. So that is a very brief potted history of what I do and how I got here.
Brilliant, thank you so much. So I'm going to now open the floor up to a few questions from us, and then hopefully some of our participants, who I know, because I've seen who you are obviously incredibly interested in engineering, will be able to ask some questions. So I think what I'll do is I'll start with the kind of the most, I'd say the youngest role, the role which is an internship role, which obviously it's come. Max, you are currently doing an internship and are at university. So I believe you must be in your year in industry, and you've done 2 internships in this year in industry. Is that correct?
So Rolls Royce actually, so it is a single year, but they split them up. They go for more breadth in the company. So we're spread up. We do 2 6-month-long internships, and they realistically want to sort of spread you around the company as far as possible, get you actually a broad perspective of it.
Okay, brilliant. And when you were looking to do an internship, did you have a number of companies you were looking at? What was your process like to gain the internship? And have you got any tips to our students on how to navigate this way of getting this internship or a year in industry?
Well, yeah, the application process seemed pretty standard for all the companies which I applied for. For example, really with Rolls Royce, it kind of started out with just the usual questions about your previous experiences, like your passions, and your CV upload, really. And that's just your first barrier. So once you pass, then the second stage is to complete the aptitude test. Now, this is usually in applied sciences and maths, but also behavioral as well, like in a working environment with prioritizing business decisions and such. If you've been successful up to this point, then you'd be invited to an assessment center or an assessment day style. In some companies, I knew that they had recorded you have to record your interviews and send those in. So here at Rolls Royce, they basically gave you a couple of interviews on the actual day itself. I, for instance, had an interview mostly about my past experience, about myself, and one, it was technical, more technical sort of interview really, where I had to actually present a technical topic, which I brought to the interview itself. However, for tips really, I guess for applying to Rolls Royce or any other company, a really good one actually is just to delve into their website and highlight their key characteristics and values, just to try and be yourself and transparent. Like, show your boundaries or your limits to your knowledge, even when it's challenged. No one expects you to know absolutely everything, so don't really act like it. I mean, especially it's like you're an early careers candidate after all, which means you're there to learn. So, I mean, I can speak on behalf of Rolls Royce, but especially at the interview level, they're just trying to spot passion and how well you work in a team.
Great. And Kat, obviously you've said this, you've been in now in, thank you, but you've been obviously in your career for a lot longer, and obviously I'm sure you therefore recruit people as part of your work. What do you look for therefore in how you recruit people, how, you know, in terms of what Max was saying as well?
Yep, so in terms of what I look for, I will always look for someone that's passionate and interested in doing the role very specifically. So typically within the interview process, you'll be able to find a little spark in someone that really shows that they have passion for sustainability and the role. In terms of key skills and things that I might look for, I will often look for people that are adaptable. So especially within sustainability and in construction, no two jobs are the same. And you will find that the job that you did last year isn't the same as the job you'll do next year. So as an example of that, 10 years ago, we used to use a lot of biomass CHP boilers. That tended to be the thing that everyone thought was sustainable. Fast forward 10 years and we now use electric air source heat pumps almost exclusively as our sustainable option. So you definitely have to be adaptable, that you can't stay stuck in a rut with sustainability. It is constantly evolving. So I'll often look for ways people can demonstrate that they're open to change and happy to be adaptable.
That's really interesting. What I'm interested in is, Daniel, the difference between you going in as like a fixed role and Alex doing a role that is obviously rotational. How, and if you could both speak on this, how Daniel first, how come you decided to do it this way, or how was that process?
Yeah, so with my process, it was a lot more straightforward, I say, to the usual like rotational grad role. So I applied for my role, for my job, probably 2 or 3 months before I actually started, and the way I was assessed was only one simple like assessment center, but it was an online one. So we'd have the usual, obviously, the one-to-one interviews where they'd ask the competency questions, and other than that, they have a technical questions. So they'll give you like a sheet of specifications, and then the last part was like a presentation, which is I did mine on my final year project.
I think it's a good advice to give to people as well, because I think a lot of people who are about to graduate get very worried about the graduate, you know, the graduate market, and oh my gosh, you know, it's this time of year, I've got to get a graduate role. And to be able to understand that, you know, just if you are getting nervous about this, and you obviously got your final year, that you can step back a bit, and there are still roles that can be found. Do you think that's right, Daniel?
Yeah. So the thing with me, so obviously when I was on my final year, I was mainly just focused on my studies. Like I know with you have to be coming quite early with the rotational grad, like the traditional like grad scheme role, and that's usually confirmed like way before you finish your actual degree. So with me, I kind of like I didn't really focus on applying for jobs when I was studying. So I just focused entirely just on doing my uni work and trying to get the best I could out of that. And then as soon as I finished my exams, I started focusing like for 2-3 months.
So I think, yeah, just knowing that there are these direct entry roles out there is really
definitely.
is really useful for people. Alex, obviously, thank you. Daniel, Alex, obviously you did it a different way, and you came through the more standard graduate recruitment way into Rolls Royce. Can you talk us a bit through that, and also explain, I mean, how many different grad jobs did you apply for before you got, did you do a load before you did Rolls Royce? Was it different? Did you have to navigate different types of graduate recruitment as you went through?
So as Daniel said, applications for grad roles tend to open in sort of September, October time, and that's when I applied. I didn't just apply for roles, I applied for maybe 20, I think, grad schemes. They're all pretty standard. I think, as Max said, you get the sort of online applications, you do your CV, and then you might have an online aptitude test, and then you go to interview. That's sort of the standard process for most companies. But I think the selling point of the rotational grad schemes is if you're not sure what you want to do. I finished my degree and I had no idea what I wanted to do. Mechanical engineering I chose because it's quite generalist, and it's not sort of setting you on a career path for the rest of your life. Mechanical engineering is more general, and then the grad scheme allowed me to continue that sort of generalization, rotating through different areas of the business, trying out different bits of engineering, was a big sort of selling point to me, which is why I ended up doing that.
And do you have any advice you could give people who are currently in your position you were a couple of years ago?
So I'd say apply early. If you can, applying as soon as the applications open in September, October, that's really worth doing. There's a really good website called Grad Cracker where you can find loads of internships and job applications, and you can get notifications when their applications open. So apply early, and it's really worth it. It's a really exciting industry to work in. It's constantly evolving. There's new technology coming out all the time that engineering then puts into real life, and I think the breadth of roles in every engineering company will be wider than you expect. The amount of variety of what you can do in Rolls Royce has surprised me, and I imagine that's similar at any other engineering company. So don't feel constricted by it, because there is so much out there.
Brilliant. And obviously, Chloe, you talk, obviously you're doing the same, you're doing a rotation at present with Air Products, and you are currently in marketing, or you started in marketing, is that right? Have you got to the stage yet that you think you know what area you want to focus on, and has it surprised you at all?
So it has surprised me completely. So I guess I touched on the marketing piece because I think it's quite important for people to know when they're joining a role or something. I was expecting to come in to a role and be a technical engineer doing calculations day in, day out. And then when the company said to me, actually, we think you could do a bit of a kind of a hybrid. We think you could do a bit of both, a bit of commercial and a bit of technical. I took a step back and was confused. I didn't know why. Actually, they were right. I do like a bit of both. So it's kind of taking that leap of faith and going, okay, well, I'll try this. If marketing's not what I want to do, and for the first few months I was adamant that it wasn't, in my next rotation, that's fine. I'll go and look at something more technical, which I did. I explored the technical, I explored then even more technical in research and development, and I came back out and went, I think they were right. I think that I do prefer having a bit of both. So I think in terms of being open to different options, learning from all of it, the things I learned in marketing, the things I learned in the deeply technical roles are all so helpful now in kind of doing the role I do now. I don't think I would necessarily stay in this role forever either. I think I'm always looking for the next challenge, the next thing. That's what is quite entertaining and good about engineering as a whole, and that the skills that you learn, you can transfer to different roles. So I like what I'm doing now, but I could take that into an operations role next, or a distribution role next, or something like that. And the opportunities are always there. Especially in my company, they do tend to kind of encourage you after a few years in one role to start thinking about how could you add bits to your role? How could you change into something else if you wanted to? Obviously, there are people who don't want to, and they want to continue on. I guess in the research and development team, they want to continue and develop specific pieces of equipment and work in kind of that area. And that's fine for the people who want to do that. There's tracks that can work for that, but there's also tracks for people like me who like to explore different things. So there's always things out there.
That's really interesting. That's interesting. You talk a lot about, thank you, transferable skills. And Lauren, I know looking at your career, there have been changes there in your career. Lauren, do you want us to talk a little bit through that and how you've been able to navigate those changes and build on your transferable skills?
Yeah, so obviously started in chemistry, which was very just doing chemistry as my degree. I didn't do any sort of medicinal chemistry or anything else on the side. It was very, very focused. And through doing that, you kind of learn so many different things. And I kind of got to learn that the areas of chemistry I liked the most was sustainability. And then from there, you kind of have the choice of, in terms of sustainability, there is science, there's engineering, there's so many ways that you can look at it. There's strategy, even if you're interested in the business side, which is why I ended up, when I was looking at graduate roles and things like that, I did look at a lot of the rotational programs like the Rolls Royce one, and I ended up going to WMG, mainly because I'm interested in the sustainability and things like that. A lot of the stuff to do with that is research and development. So WMG provides that research and development work, basically. So I was able to work on all those different projects. By working there, I did, I think, 4 or 5 different placements, and they were so varied over the course of me being there. It was really, really useful for me. I was able to work on both my laboratory skills, so actually doing stuff in the lab in itself, designing experiments, doing the experiments, looking at the safety, risk assessments. All of those things are all transferable into loads of other things in engineering. Also, though, some of the other work I worked on was actually doing some stakeholder work with Innovate UK, which is a government research body, looking at actually what are the targets that we need for batteries for the future. So it was kind of more of a business side strategy, looking at what we actually need to be doing going forward. And that one was really, really interesting. And then actually moving into my new role, it's not actually doing anything particularly science or engineering. It's actually just building on all of those things that I learned in the time that I've been at uni, in my previous job, and taking all of that knowledge of sort of net zero and applying that to more of a strategic role, and looking at how we're going to build projects that are going to get us to net zero, and what partners and what organizations we could work with in order to get there. So yeah, I've kind of gone through loads of different areas in terms of engineering, science, business, but they've all kind of had this sustainability aspect. So if you kind of pick a topic that you're really interested in, you can do anything with it, basically, is what I've learned.
Kat, would you agree with that then?
100%. So I started, like I said, I did my PhD, which was to a point kind of chemical engineering on the sustainability side. I ended up in buildings, and I've done loads of different roles that have all had the same thread of sustainable buildings in them for me. And yeah, I totally agree that if I was to recruit someone with a few years experience, I would be looking for the sustainability, but I wouldn't necessarily mind what they'd been working on previously. So if it was infrastructure or something different to buildings, 100% agree that it's very transferable.
I'm really, really excited that in the panel that we have here, it's literally half women and half men, which is great. And I'll ask you, Kat, but how have you found, especially you work in construction and and engineering, how have you found it being a woman in engineering? Have you had barriers, or do you feel now, and have you found ways to overcome them? Or if you haven't, that's great, but how would you inspire women to take the roles?
In terms of working construction as a woman, I think our industry has come on an awful long way, and now a lot of the things that were more difficult at the beginning of my career, we've kind of sorted them. So it's still a very male-dominated world, but there's no prejudice for being a woman, and I think there's more and more value being placed on like mixed teams, where you get probably a better balance than a traditional male construction team. So personally, I don't find a lot of difficulties, but I'm also very lucky that I've worked for companies that really embrace women and that side of things. So I'm sure elsewhere in the industry, we still have some challenges to go.
Do you have anything, Lauren or Chloe, to add to that?
I would kind of agree. I think so. The places I've worked at have been very good places to work in terms of being a woman in STEM. Working at a university, obviously, that's very at the forefront of kind of equality, diversity, and things like that. So actually, I think most of the research team was very 50-50 in terms of male to female ratio. Working at National Grid, you can definitely see there's certain areas that there's maybe a little bit more of a disparity. And I think it's just because of the penetration to certain areas of industry hasn't happened yet. So in my team, which is a lot of the support for the engineering projects, that we're very 50-50. I think actually there might be more. I know my team of 3 is 100% female. So there is actually more of us in some areas. But then if you work in some certain areas, I know that there is, so for example, in some of the modeling aspects of work, you tend to find maybe that area has more guys going into it. I think that's just because there hasn't been the penetration into the IT modeling aspects of engineering yet. But I think it will come with time. It just doing more of these events and encouraging people. I've done a lot while I was working at university of events with younger girls to talk about engineering, and the interest from girls is definitely getting a lot better, and it's definitely going to improve in the future.
Great, thank you. Chloe?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would really add on to what these guys have said is just being confident. So I go to customer sites quite a lot. 90% of the time I'm going to see a man, which is fine. And it's just a case of walking in and knowing, well, we all want to get to the same agenda. We all want to work together on this. There's no specific times, I think, where I've felt that because I'm a woman, I can't do the same job as someone who would be male and doing my job. It's just a case of walking in with the same confidence and having those same conversations, because a lot of the time, the things that I guess would have been a barrier in my own head would just be, oh, he's talking in this way, and that's not the way I'm used to, whether that's because he's a man and I'm a woman, or whether it's just because of diversity, even up and down. I cover the whole of the country, so even up and down the country, if I go to a customer in Yorkshire compared to one in the south, there's slight little differences. So it's just knowing that nobody doesn't want you to succeed. I don't think in the times that we're in now, everybody wants everybody to succeed. So just go in with confidence and it'll work out, I think.
Brilliant. No, thank you for that, ladies. Max, obviously you are doing your year in industry, and so when you're choosing a anyone can answer this as well, when you chose your degree, did you specifically look for one that had a year in industry? Is that what you wanted? And if it is, do you think that has fulfilled its expectations? Max is here.
So yeah, my degree wasn't actually, I wasn't checking out to see if there was actually any opportunities for industry sort of placement. This was actually something that I picked up in the very beginning of my second year at uni. So at the very start, I dedicated that year to trying to sort of like find myself an industry placement. And so I guess the flexibility of sort of choosing that is very sort of like broad. I thankfully had quite a bit of experience to really sort of like, I guess, word and use for my application. But if you had some time to sort of prepare, you could just as easily, I guess, fill the criteria to actually sort of like be out there looking for placements, really. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, so do you feel, I mean, I don't know, did anybody else who's more now recent happen here in industry? Daniel, did you have?
Yeah, I was gonna add, so basically with the placement year, so basically my journey of university, so I started off by having a foundation year, and I didn't really know I wanted to go into engineering when I finished my A levels. So I did a foundation, and obviously because I found like physics really difficult at A level. So doing the foundation year actually helped me like know myself that I can do it and I enjoy it. And I wanted to do the placement year because obviously that year is obviously valuable. You see it as the outside, but when you're actually doing your studies, because I did the foundation year and obviously first year, second year, it's like 3 years and it's kind of exhausting like being in education for that long. and like having that 1 year of like in industry is a good like break from studying and like seeing what you're actually doing at university and like how you're going to apply these skills in the future. So I think is like it's like you could say it's a break because and you can actually like see what you're gonna do with everything. So like, I felt after like second year, I was just thinking, oh, I'm doing all of this like theoretical work in university, and it's not actually going anywhere. It's not getting applied anywhere. And when after I like went on that placement, I think it was the best thing because after you've done that, like when you come back into finish your studies, doing your final year or your masters, uh, it is like refreshes you, and you feel like you know what you're like, what you're gonna get out of doing all of this, like studying and all of this knowledge and stuff. And then yeah, so because I've got a year in industry, it like
Yeah.
shows that yeah.
I think that you're so right. I think that probably gave you the complete edge, and you had real life experience, which as you said, you know, if everything's so theoretical, having that real life experience is really useful to people. Did you do a year in industry?
I didn't. I actually chose not to. I was quite keen to be done with education as quickly as possible and actually get into the workplace and start working, which I think is probably quite an unusual point of view. But I did a summer internship because I felt that I needed that lived experience that you talked about, that you definitely get from a year in industry. But I was quite keen to see if I could get it other ways. So I did a 10-week summer internship, which I think it's not as good and you won't get as much experience as a year in industry, obviously, because it's only a summer, but it's really, really valuable and really helps with any applications that you do.
And where did you do that?
So that was at Rolls Royce as well. It helps with the application for the grad scheme if you happen to have done a summer internship here.
Brilliant. Yeah, well, obviously you're proof in the pudding there, I would say. I want to open the question up to people who are listening at present. Is there any questions from our audience right now? If so, could you write them in the chat, please? I'll keep the chat open. I just want to ask anybody right now, is there any other kind of advice you can give people into looking into navigating into a career in engineering? And obviously, is it possible, for example, if you've done one type of engineering at university, to then find a role in a different type? I mean, because everyone here we've talked about is talking about those transferable skills and moving across. You know, if you did mech eng, which you said you did, Alex, do you think it's possible to then find a role somewhere else? You know, and how, if you want to do that, how can you navigate that? Could anyone talk on that?
I'll jump on that one first. I think, so I did mechanical engineering. I would argue that the standard at Rolls Royce is probably aerospace engineering, but it's not a restrictor. Mechanical engineering is quite a general one, but even if you did something more specific, we've got chemistry grads, we've got chemical engineering grads, and that doesn't stop you from excelling at your job when you turn up at Rolls Royce or anywhere else, because engineering is about sort of how you analyze things and approach problems. So even if it's not the specific problem that you've trained for at university, it's just as applicable anywhere else.
Thank you very much. I have a question. How important is it to do a master's?
I have a slightly different, I guess, opinion on that. So my integrated master's in chemistry, I would say potentially probably could have managed without that. There were people who joined my graduate scheme who had only done a BSc in chemistry, and they were doing the exact same thing. The problem solving is the same. The thing that's maybe a little bit different for me is I'm doing an additional master's now, which is a bit of an unusual thing to do, which has had a more businessy side to it. So I've done a lot of strategy, business development stuff. So if you're wanting to maybe move into something different, then you do have the option of doing a master's later on. So don't think that because you've done a particular course, you're stuck. There's always these 1-year courses that are like business or whatever, which you can then use, which did really help me in getting my new job, which is very stakeholder engagement heavy and strategy heavy, because I had that extra sort of business knowledge on how to deal with that. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's necessary. You can learn a lot of this stuff elsewhere. It's more that if you don't have that experience from your job, a master's can be a very easy way of making sure that you gain experience in a specific topic area if you know you're going to need it.
Thank you. Chloe, what do you think on that?
Yeah, so I was just going to say, I think it depends on the person as well. So for me, I did a master's. I think if I had left university after just the bachelor's, I hadn't done any industrial experience at that point. I did my summer placement in between the bachelor's and the master's. I think I still needed another year to grow in confidence and know that I could apply the things that I had learned at that point. And I think doing the summer placement and then the master's helped me to do that. I think in terms of getting the role that I got in my graduate position, I think, like everybody said, the placement and the industrial experience was really, really key for that. But the masters did help to kind of, yeah, have something specific to talk about in terms of a project. I think in terms of chartership as well, it just makes a difference in terms of where you want to take your career. If you want to become a chartered engineer, I don't know what it's like for mechanical engineering, but for chemical engineering, if you've done a master's at an accredited university, the chartership process is a lot easier. You just have to write a report about your experiences and how you've applied that.
Thank you. That was really helpful, really interesting. And I hope that we've been able to go through the gamut of different opportunities into engineering. And I really appreciate the time that everyone's taken today to help. So thank you ever so much. And we'll be putting this online for others to gain information as well. So much appreciated. Thank you. Bye-bye. Cheers.